That's why they're busy as a bee.
Do they take weekends off?
No weekends, no nights, no days.
What?
Hey there, travelers. Today I'm at Mass Audubon's Drumlin Farm and Wildlife Sanctuary. They take care of goats, sheep, cows, and a very special animal we're learning about today, honeybees. Meet Mel, beekeeper extraordinaire at Mass Audubon's Drumlin Farm. We hop into his beemobile where he drives us to our first beehive. So Mel, this looks like a bee mansion. What am I looking at here?
This is called a Slovenian Beehive. The yellow portion is the beehive itself. Looks like a kitchen cabinet. They've developed this kind of lazy man's approach to beekeeping. There are no boxes to lift except when you initially set it up.
Whoa. After starting off in Slovenia, we traveled over to a different hive where we learned about bee behavior. Can you tell me what kind of beehive I'm looking at here?
So this is called a Warre hive, the hive that replicates what the bees would do in the wild. They would find a tree with an open hole and they would start building their comb inside the hive from the top down. You don't get as much honey, but not all of us are only interested in the honey. It's also making sure there are a lot more bees out there in the world, since we'll be in a lot of trouble if they disappear.
Mel, I see a lot of bees flying around right now, making me a little nervous. What are they doing?
Well, you shouldn't be nervous. Most of them are probably bees that have recently been born. So what they do is they do orientation flights. They come outside the hive and they'll fly around and they locate the position of the hive based on the position of the sun. They're setting their own internal GPS. And then some of them are just probably warming up and some of them will take off and go looking for flowers, pick up nectar and pollen.
Aw, baby bees. That's
Baby
adorable.
bees.
Next, Mel lets us get an insider look into what the busy bees are doing in the hive. So Mel is about to show us Bee Reality TV. We're gonna take a look right inside the hive.
The Warre hives have these windows that will open up and you can see inside. You can see the natural honeycomb that they've been building out. Bees secrete little cells of wax from a cell in their head and they shape it with their feet, work together to create the beeswax and make the honeycomb. And then the queen is in there somewhere laying eggs and they're starting to store pollen and nectar to convert to honey.
How long does it take them to make a comb like this?
They could build out a box in a week.
Mel, these bees make me feel lazy.
Well, when you only live 4 to 6 weeks, you got to get a lot of work in during the season. And they'll do every job that the hive has. So when they're first born, they become nurse bees, they become cleaners, so they'll clean the cells out so the queen can lay another egg in it. They'll clean the cells out so that the worker bees who are bringing in the honey, the nectar, can store the nectar. They'll become mortuary bees, so if someone dies in the hive, they will push that out of the hive. They will also clean out cells where an egg might not have developed. They become guard bees where they guard the entrance. So the queen in this hive will spray something called a pheromone, which is like a perfume, and it's got an odor that's very specific to her. And she sprays it across all the bees so that when they go out and they come back, if a bee from another hive try to get in here and the guard bees don't smell that smell, they're not going to let that bee in.
I didn't know the bees had so many jobs.
How do they decide what job is which? Do they fill out an application?
I just think it's in their DNA that as they age, they switch to the next job. They've been around a lot longer than us, and they've been doing things a lot longer than us, so they kind of know what to do. Because this box is almost built out, I'm going to need to add another box, probably within the week. Because if it gets overcrowded, they'll leave. So that's one of the jobs that the beekeeper does, is making sure that there's enough space for them to live.
I learned that there are 3 different types of bees: the queen, the drone, and the worker.
Most of the bees in there are female. There's one queen. There are a few hundred male bees who are called drones, whose whole purpose in life is to go out and hook up with an unfertilized queen. And the rest of the bees are all female, the workers. They make all the decisions. The only decision a queen makes is whether or not an egg that she's laid is going to become a male bee, a drone, or a female. Female eggs are fertilized. Drones are unfertilized eggs.
She decides if it's a male or a female?
Right, and then she'll decide to make more males if there are not enough males in the hive that will go out and hook up with a virgin queen. But that's the only decision she gets to make. All the other decisions about the hive are made by the worker bees. And
we could learn a thing or two from bees, huh?
Oh, just a few.
I never knew there were different types of beehives. Next, Mel tells us a little bit more about how bees talk and why they make such a delicious treat known as honey. Yum! Mel, how long have you been a beekeeper?
So I started beekeeping about 10 years ago. Finally put a garden in at my house. I wanted to make sure the vegetable garden got pollinated. So I started with something called mason bees. Kind of said to my wife, well, if I'm going to have bees, why not have honeybees and get the honey and help produce more bees out there? I went to bee school and learned about keeping bees and got hooked and just started keeping them at my house. I was out here at Drumlin for a workshop on making sausages. And I met the woman who runs adult programs, and we started talking about their bees, and they had 2 hives out here but didn't really do many programs. And to make a long story short, I basically met with their director and worked out to start a beekeeping program for them. We now have 14 hives out here.
14 hives? How many bees is that?
Well, at the height of the season, when they're all full, there'll be 60 to 70,000 bees in each hive. So you do the math. At 10, that would be 700,000 bees. So it's probably close to 800,000 bees out on Mass Audubon property out here.
Only 800,000 bees?
Only 800,000.
Mel, what's your favorite part about beekeeping?
I actually love teaching kids about the bees. I also get totally mesmerized when I'm working with the bees, and I'm even at home where I sit on my deck and watch the bees coming and going. You get totally mesmerized watching them coming into the hive and leaving the hive.
So Mel, you really taught us that they are very busy bees. How do they communicate?
So bees communicate in basically one major way. They do what they call a waggle dance or a waggle dance, where they dance in a certain particular direction inside the hive on the frames, and that vibration and that movement transfers to all the other bees so that they know where to find the good flowers that have good nectar and pollen, and where to find water. They'll let them know, and the direction and the speed that the bees are dancing and inside the hive will tell the bees where those things are. That's the major way that they communicate. Now, they communicate with me by their noise. If they're really upset with me, they'll be quite loud. And if they're not really upset, they'll be a lot quieter and more gentle.
I tried to communicate like a bee, but it turns out I communicate a little better as a human.
The bees are ignoring me.
Although I was secretly a little nervous about this next part, Mel and I decided to have a closer look inside the hive. But as always, safety first.
The latest in bee fashion.
After getting dressed, we put together the smoker, which is a tool that helps us communicate with the bees and tell them that we're entering their hive. Mel reminded me that it's not a good idea to just open up the hive and pop your head in. There's a process that a beekeeper must take to ensure safety for themselves and the bees. Knock knock, bees. We're coming in.
And how many bees are in here?
Oh, there's probably 40, 50,000. And that's all honey that's capped.
There are so many bees right now.
After getting up and close to the beehives at Drumlin Farm and seeing all that Mel does to ensure healthy hives, I wanted to learn about hives in the wild.
Mel, you taught me so much about bees today, but how are bees doing in the wild?
Well, the bees are still in a lot of trouble. Colony collapse is still an issue, where the beekeepers come to their hives and no one's home. Farmers are still using too many chemicals. Luckily out here at Mass Audubon's Drumlin Farm, they use no chemicals. Everything is done in a natural approach. Because otherwise, if we lose the bees and other pollinators, 30 to 40% of the food will disappear because they're totally dependent upon the pollinators for pollination.
Well, I know that our travelers at home are going to be so inspired by what you taught us today. Is there anything they can do at home to help out bees in the wild?
Sure. Convince your parents to keep bees in their backyard. The more hobbyist beekeepers there are, the better. We run a beekeeping school here 5 weeks during the winter, where each year I've gotten over 40 students who are hobbyist beekeepers. So the more beekeepers out there, the more bees there'll be. They should also get their parents to stop using chemicals in the gardens and do a more natural approach. Plant more wildflowers.
Here are bee-friendly flowers to keep in your garden. Daisy, lavender.
The biggest thing I tell little kids is dandelions, which a lot of people consider a weed or one of the first flowers to bloom in the spring in this region, and the bees love them. It's one of the best early foods for the bees. Have your parents not pull the dandelions. And dandelion greens are a food source. A lot of people will cook them and eat them as a salad. So they can start simply by not having the dandelions pulled, not using chemicals in their gardens, planting more wildflowers. There are a lot of things they can do.
Thanks for checking us out, travelers. We learned so much today at Mass Audubon's Drumlin Farm and Wildlife Sanctuary. If you want to learn more about bees and how you can help them out in the wild, visit travstravels.org. If you want to know more about Mel's Bee School, check out Mass Audubon's website. Keep on traveling.